Hello, this is Joe Trahan, welcoming you to the All Me podcast from the Taylor Hooton Foundation, whose mission is to enlighten the world to the truths about appearance and performance-enhancing substances. As the national leader on this subject, they communicate their educational messages through various methods, including this podcast. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show.
Hey everyone, Brian Parker back as your host for today's international episode. If you follow our foundation and listen to this podcast, you'll know that a majority of our work happens domestically right here in the United States. But sometimes it's important to remember that many of the things that we educate on are worldwide issues. So today we are taking you to Norway to talk with Kristoffer Loftheim from Anti-Doping Norway. Anti-Doping Norway is a non-profit organization. It was established back in 2003 to manage the doping enforcement in cases independently from the Olympic committees and the Norwegian Government. What's great about their organization is that they also focus on doping in society as a whole, and they have tremendous programs to combat recreational doping outside of national competition. This is the side of the organization that Kristoffer works in because he's an advisor to fitness centers across the country. So I talked to Chris about what his job entails, how he got into the industry, and what programs they provide to fitness centers and others to combat and educate on these issues. We also talk about the use of appearance and performance-enhancing substances as a whole in Norway to see how their usage and issues compares to ours here in the States. We both believe in the power of prevention. We're going to learn how Kristoffer and Anti-Doping Norway do that every single day. So let's head overseas and welcome Chris into the show. Kristoffer, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing great. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm excited for this one. You know, so many times when we do these episodes, we talk to people domestically here in the U.S., but a lot of the topics that we discuss are worldwide issues. So it's pretty exciting that we get someone from Norway on the other side of the world to give us a perspective of some of the issues going on there and the topics and learn more about your organization and what we're doing. So I'm interested to learn more. I think our listeners are going to find this fascinating as well. So this is going to be a fun conversation. Are you ready to roll?
Yeah, I'm ready. Thank you, Brian.
Perfect. Well, I've never done one of these podcasts and not started by learning a little bit more about who I'm talking with. So before we dive into your organization and Anti-Doping Norway and everything that you do there, tell us a little bit more about your background. How did you get into the field of anti-doping and kind of what was your career path leading up to what you do right now?
Sure. So I guess I'll start from the beginning. I'm obviously from Norway. I'm from a small part of Norway in the southern tip of Norway called Mandal. And so this is where I went to school, and I started sports at a pretty sort of young age. Karate was my competitive sport, and I started competing there. So I guess that was sort of how I got into the whole sports thing. And I competed at a national level, and I got invited to the national team, where I guess there's a lot of focus on performing, and as you probably know, karate it's a weight sport, so you're put into different weight classes. Mm-hmm. So I guess so something started there around the whole performing and cutting weight thing, and I think at one point, well, I didn't do well. I started studying at about 18 after I had an injury. I dislocated my shoulder and had surgery, which sort of abruptly ended my career there. But then I did the whole rehab for the shoulder, and I found that very interesting. So I started studying physiotherapy. And graduated physiotherapy. So that's where I got into the whole health thing. So the background is pretty much from sports and from health. And after I graduated and specialized in musculoskeletal physiotherapy, I started a clinic in Oslo, and I ran that for about 10 years. And that's where I guess where those two crossed, because I was invited to, or I was lucky enough to be involved in the support personnel. I was the medical officer for the Norwegian national team of karate. And I treated both athletes and patients from all different parts of society in the clinic. And there were some sort of similarities I guess I saw with people and their sort of body perception, and I saw young athletes having injuries that sort of seemed a bit abnormal, like when you have tendon ruptures in healthy young men, for example. And I later found out that it was probably connected to anabolic steroid use. And so that's sort of the whole interest of how on one point where you're doing something healthy, like the paradox in training as a healthy variable sort of turns into, or spirals into, something negative. And that sort of fascinated me a bit. And after I transitioned into, I was lucky enough to apply for the position in Anti-Doping Norway to run the Clean Fitness Center program, and I got that position, and I guess that's pretty much my career path and leading up to where I'm at now. Whereas I'm working as an advisor for Anti-Doping Norway, and I run the anti-doping program for the Norwegian fitness centers, called the Clean Fitness Center program.
Yeah, all that makes sense. It's always fascinating to learn how people get to where they are. And there's a few things that I've learned about you that fascinates me already. First off, I was looking at a map of Norway and where you're from. And I wish I could spend this whole podcast learning more about Norway, because it's been a country I've wanted to go to for a long time, but we'll save that for a later date. I also learned that I better stay on your good side. If you competed nationally in karate, I better stay friends with you so I don't lose a fight, because it sounds like that would happen pretty easily. Number three, one of the things that I think is always interesting, because injuries seem to happen a lot in sport, maybe even more than they used to. And I don't know how often people end up connecting the dots back to something like anabolic steroid use, but I think it is more prevalent than people might be aware of, just because people aren't aware of how prevalent the usage is in the first place of that. So I think it's kind of interesting that you connected those dots and that brought you to where you are now, which takes me directly to my next question, because before I dive into what you do specifically for Anti-Doping Norway, I want to learn more about the organization as a whole. So tell us a little bit about how was it formed, how is it funded, and in general, what is its purpose overall?
Sure. So good question. So the organization is a non-profit foundation. It was founded in 2003. And it was established by the Ministry of Culture here in Norway and the Confederation of Sport and the Norwegian Olympic and Paralympic Committee. So its purpose is to sort of separate the control and prosecution activities for anti-doping cases from the governing or from the founding body. So it's really the anti-doping work. In order to be effective, the anti-doping work needs to be sort of separate from the sports organizations themselves.
Sure.
So I guess it's a separation of powers somehow. So as you can, similar to governments, where you put the judicial body in one part and the executive part, and So it's just really to secure independence, I guess, in the anti-doping work. And that's why most of its funding is, even though it's sort of a private foundation and a non-profit foundation, most of its funding is from the Ministry of Culture and from the that's where it started, and now afterwards it gets a lot of its founding from the Ministry of Health as well, to do work in the society as a large, whereas the Ministry of Culture funds the work we do in organized sports. And then we do a bit of test, like mission work as well, where we go in and do sort of events that needs an anti-doping program in order to be able to compete at a national level. So we supply sort of an anti-doping program to them as well. And the last part of our funding is from the fitness centers, where we do a self-financed anti-doping program, which we deliver to the fitness centers of Norway.
Yeah, I would imagine probably the closest thing that a lot of our listeners in the U.S. can compare you to is USADA, the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency. You might have a little bit wider array of things that you do than USADA does, but a lot of similar work in regards to what the purpose of the organization is, and gives us an idea on how we can connect the two. And I spent some time looking at your website before you and I were chatting, just to learn about everything that your organization does. And I kind of found your organizational chart, and there's various departments within your organization, which you've kind of been talking about already. And your role is not so much on the state-sponsored competition side, right? It's a little bit more in the prevention and public health department, because, as you said, you work with the fitness centers, right? So what's the role of that department? And I guess an easy way to ask that question is, what does an average day look like for you when you show up to the office? What are the kind of things that you're working on in your department?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I think you're right. And I work. I don't do any work with the organized sports. I work solely in prevention and public health. So I have very little to do with the testing of sort of national athletes or top level athletes, which you sort of often compare or often associate with the National Anti-Doping Agency. So I work pretty much only with prevention and public health, but our department works with preventing doping or with both within organized sports, and we have another branch that works outside of organized sports, and I'm outside the organized sports as well. So a day for me is I cater to the fitness industry. So they really I run the program that pretty much. So we deliver education, and we do courses for the fitness industry. We run a certification program, which they have to sign an agreement with us, and then they get a set of requirements that they have to fulfill in order to be able to sort of be certified a clean fitness center, which they then can put on their door and sort of make a proud statement that they've done the body of work that gives them the accreditation of being a clean fitness center. So it pretty much is providing a program that should, the end goal is to provide a healthy, safe training environment for the Norwegian fitness centers, really.
Yeah, I think that's great. That's one of the things that I found really interesting when I was looking through your website, is that you did kind of look beyond just the organized competition, because, as you know, because you're in the space, so much usage is happening outside of that, right? And I'm curious, was this, when the organization was founded, I think you said in 2003, was this part of the mission from the start, to deal with the general public, to look beyond just the competition itself? And this kind of combines one of my other questions, was this always there, that department? And is it because you already knew that there was a lot of usage being done outside of competition? Because that's what we run into in the US. The majority of substance users are actually non-athletes, driven by body image, external pressures in the gyms, in the fitness centers. We know that there's usage there. So did you also know that usage was there, and has this department been there from the start because of that?
Originally, I don't think that was the part of it. So I think it was just the Ministry of Culture that sort of funded it with the purpose of actually combating doping in organized sports. But pretty quickly, I think they realized that this is like, all athletes are part of the society, right? So they don't sort of operate in a vacuum, and they put into their founding. I'm not quite familiar with the word, but they're that they were to be able to do activities without outside sports as well, because they quickly realized that this is it's a public health problem, not a sports problem as such as well. So it quickly, the Department of Public Prevention and Public Health got founded within our department as well. And it's been, I think it's been the quickly like the most rapid growing department within the organization since then, because there's definitely like, doping is definitely a public health problem as well. It's not just a sports problem, and where athletes are part of the society. And I think some people view it too much as they're in this bubble competing only against but they're definitely a part of the society. And if we can prevent it in society, I think we can help prevent it in sports as well.
Well, and even the term athlete has such a broad range on what that even means, right? You don't have to be playing on the national team to be an athlete. You could be playing, on a local team or playing
Sure.
recreational sports. And in my opinion, you're still an athlete. So I think it's a crucial piece to this conversation, a crucial part of your work that you're applying this information and awareness and education to people beyond just, the Norwegian official, state sponsored athletes, whatever they may be. So I think that's fascinating. I think it's important just because even in our work, we get that a lot when we kind of tell them what we do and the topics we discuss. They think, oh, well, let me connect you with my athletic department. You can talk to them. Well, that's important, but there's usage going on in a variety of different demographics. So I think that's a really crucial part of what you're doing. And before I dive into a little bit more on what you're doing and how you're doing it, I want to kind of compare some more of the usage between your country and mine and see if you're seeing a lot of the same things that we're seeing here. And I guess I'll start with just a little bit of a factual question. When it comes to anabolic steroids as an example, because the laws vary in different countries, obviously. Are they legal in Norway? Because here in the United States, they're a Schedule 3 controlled substance, which all that means is you're only able to access them with a doctor's prescription. Is that how it's set up there? What are the laws in Norway when it comes to steroids?
Yeah, that's a good question, and we talk a lot about that with our European colleagues as well, because the laws differ quite a bit inside of Europe as well, and even in the Nordic countries. So in Norway, as I've heard, is pretty common everywhere else in the world, like sale and distribution and import, and that's been illegal for quite some time. The difference between Norway and a lot of the other countries is that it's illegal to use anabolic steroids and doping as well, like what are classified as doping.
Mm-hmm.
So that differs quite a bit from even our neighboring countries, where use is allowed, but import and distribution is illegal. And a major part of that is actually something that happened the 22nd of July 2011, and there was a mass shooting in Norway, which was quite terrible. And the guy that did this, the terrorists, were in his manifest. He wrote how he had used anabolic steroids to achieve a certain mental state that he needed to be able to condone or not to conduct this. And he described that he did research into the different steroids that were supposed to put him in enhanced aggression and lower his empathy and be more calculated in order to do this. So a few years later, in 2013, the Norwegian Parliament passed a law banning use of steroids, and that was not entirely, or not just because of the health issues connected with using them, but because of the danger to what they call the third party, because steroid use doesn't just affect the user themselves, but it leads to endangerment of a third party, and that was a good example of them. And it's been known throughout I think, like in the early 80s and 90s, how they would combine, how sort of criminal factions would combine the usage of anabolic steroids and stimulants in order to do crime, I guess.
Right.
But that was the I guess the thing that differs is the law that was passed in 2013 banning use in Norway because of the endangerment to a third party.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, number one, sometimes it can be frustrating that change only happens out of tragedy. Sometimes it takes something to happen for people to realize, that this was something that needed to happen, but maybe before that happened. But you're right. The reason I asked that question is because I think I told you this already, but I did a podcast with an anti-doping group out of Finland, and their laws are different. It is, as you said, it is illegal to produce and sell them, but not illegal to use them. So they have a whole different, setup, because there's not as much deterrent for usage, obviously, if it's legal to do so. So I know that changes the game some when it's illegal on all aspects, which it is here as well. And I'm wondering if that leads to different usage rates for you. And I know putting your finger on exactly how many people are using stuff is not an easy thing to do. But do you have any studies there, or numbers on what percentage or range of percentage of Norway's population might be using something like anabolic steroids? Is there any kind of information on specific ages or demographics that you're seeing the most there? I know that may be hard and you might not have those numbers, but what are you seeing or what has come out there?
Yeah, as you rightly say, then the prevalence numbers are really hard to come by just because there's quite a bit of stigma involved in doing anabolic steroids. So we've seen is that it's hard to actually produce numbers where people tell the truth and they're susceptible to sort of wrong answers, and so it's hard to predict the real numbers. What the best numbers we have in Norway is somewhere between 1% and 3% at a lifetime sort of prevalence rate. But we think that the numbers there are probably a lot of what we call dark numbers, or and this is like the numbers we have from 1% to 3%, where I think there's about 2.4 for men and 0.9 something for women, but that's from the age of 16 to 80. So I mean, there's quite a broad age spectrum. So if you were to sort of pull out sort of a smaller part of this within the age group of, let's say, 20 to 35, 40, we might, and you even take people that are interested in going to the gym and sort of building muscle, and we might see larger numbers. We don't really have the data to say that. So the best data we have is 1% to 3%. But we have some studies that are interesting on certain populations, and what we see is that people within, I guess, prisoners in the Norwegian prison system, we have prevalence numbers of about 35 to 37% that have a reported use. So there are some demographics that we have that show sort of numbers that are quite a bit higher than what we see on the sort of population level, I guess, of the national population levels.
Yeah, numbers are always hard, and even when we, are out there doing our education, we try not to get too caught up in them because studies are they're difficult, right? I mean, we've seen studies that probably range our usage here in the U.S. 4% to 6%, but again, you can't ask everybody. Not everybody's going to be honest. I always say those numbers are probably low because people aren't going to tell you. People are taking things in supplements that they aren't aware of. So even if it is 3 to 5 to 6%, still in my mind that's significant enough. If I'm 4 to 6%, and I'm 1 out of every 14 people, that's a lot, right? So it's even 2% adds up. So I was just curious what you're seeing. Maybe a little bit lower than us, but again, hard to compare with just the way studies are done in that area. I guess here's a good kind of comparison point that I'm curious if you're seeing as well, seeing that you're in the space. So let's say you do come across that 1% to 3%, or you do talk to some of the demographics incarcerated that have been using this stuff. How are you finding that they're getting their hands on this stuff? So if it's your laws are the same as ours, where illegal to buy, illegal to sell, illegal to use, how are they getting this stuff? Because what we see is that most of the time they're just buying their stuff online, where you can it's coming from who knows where in the world, and it's just showing up at your house. Are you seeing the same kind of thing here? Is that how most people get their hands on this stuff that you've come across?
I think that's absolutely the same. I think the sort of the emergence of social media and internet and has made the accessibility of doping much more. It's much easier to get your hands on now than it was a bit before. And what we're definitely seeing is increased accessibility, and we get reports from customs as well that they seize more than before now. So, and we have websites that are just a click away that have sort of deliverance guarantees. Like if your product gets seized by customs, you get a new one for free as well. So I think it's pretty easy and pretty sort of low risk to buy this stuff online or through social media or through So I think it's definitely a lot of the same ways people get their hands on it here as over where you're on.
That's what I assumed. I wanted you to confirm it, but that's the internet for you. The internet's
Yeah,
sometimes it's a good thing. I mean, it's allowing you and I to have a conversation in two very different
sure.
places, but a lot of negatives happening online as well, and including the sale of a lot of this stuff. So I assume that's where a lot of people are getting it, even in countries outside of the U.S. and Norway. It's an issue that we've got to continue to talk about in hopes that we can be more aware that it's happening. And my last issue that we have here that I want to kind of pick your brain in regards to a comparison point and see how similar some of this stuff is. I'm curious on dietary supplement use there as well, and you may even have a different term for that than what we have here, but that kind of stuff is extremely popular here. When we do our education programs, I spend half of our time talking about supplements. It's a very large industry. And when I say that, I'm talking about, things, powders, pills, bars and shakes, creatines, energy drinks, pre-workouts, vitamins, all of those kinds of things are what we refer to as supplements.
Sure.
The issues that we have here is not that usage is happening. That's not our issues. We have some regulation issues. Those products are not required to be tested before they're purchased, which can lead to some issues within that industry. So are those products popular over there? Do you have regulations there in place for that kind of stuff? What issues do you run into with that kind of stuff, if any?
Sure, that's very interesting. I think we had the exact same experience. We spend quite a bit, or maybe the majority of our time, talking about supplements when we do education as well. Obviously, because they're a major business over here as well. I think supplements and supplement use, we know, is very popular, especially among young kids, and it's increasing quite a bit. So that's one part of it, and I think the regulations are pretty much the same. It's I think it's the Department of Food and Nutrition or something that regulates it, which it's not put under the pharmaceutical regulation. So you can put a product on the market without testing it, and then if something happens or something is discovered in that, and they have to pull it. And that's difference between if you launch sort of a pharmaceutical, then it has to be thoroughly tested for no negative side effects before it hits the market. So if it was regulated the same way, a lot of the supplements probably wouldn't have hit the market with sort of some of the ingredients in it. And we see that's one part of it. And since we do the testing in the national, or we do doping testing of athletes, what we see is that there definitely is a problem with contamination of supplements here, and that athletes get their hands on as well. So quite a bit of our cases throughout the years have been connected to supplement use, where at one part the athlete says that it's because of the supplement, and in a very large number of cases we can actually prove that it was because of a contaminated supplement as well. So of course there are two sort of issues there. You can there's the obvious health issue to the population if supplements contain sort of health dangerous substances, and if you're an athlete as well, you might end up testing positive without your knowledge or without having and it might ruin your career as well. So it's we spend quite a bit of time just talking about, do you need it? Does it really help you? What are the adverse effects? What risks are you taking if you're doing it? So I think we share the same. We spend quite a bit of time talking about it.
We have a lot of similarities. Just listening to you talk, I'm like, man, I feel like you're a coworker of mine, because when we go out, we're on the road. That's the exact same kind of things we do. It's not about condemning supplement use, not at all. But again, we had a lot of the same laws and regulation issues that you do. There's not required testing. That's not what this category is. And so there are products that end up being spiked or contaminated with dangerous stuff in order to make their products more effective. And so that we do the same thing with, it's not about getting people to stop, but it's again about getting them to think, well, what am I buying? What's inside the jar? Do I need this? Do I know how to use it? Like, just getting them to think through the process and navigate that industry. I think that's a key piece to the education that you and I are both doing. So there's a lot of similarities in regards to set up laws, issues, and what you're doing. And I think that's always interesting to know, because sometimes even I get caught up in the bubble of just the country I'm in and thinking this is how things are, and not realizing that, man, that a lot of this is not just simply where I'm at. It's issues that are all over the map, which is
Yeah, I think we're really seeing that sort of globalizing effect now. So I think a lot of our sort of the youth in Norway, they have their influencers and role models over in the US as well, and they're influenced by the trends of the whole, like social media and the internet
yeah,
really is a global thing.
yeah.
So I think the problems tend to be a global thing as well.
Social media is not going anywhere, and it is
No,
connecting
no,
all of us for good and for bad. It's
sure.
again, it's that connectivity is a really cool thing. It can be a powerful thing, but sometimes it can be a dangerous thing too, depending on what they're looking at and what they're seeing and the messages that they're getting, from various things and people that they see. So yeah, it's made the world a lot smaller, that's for sure. And so I guess,
Yeah,
knowing that, it's
sure.
not surprising that we see some of the same issues across the map. And so knowing that you and I are seeing the same issues, I want to spend kind of the last little part of our conversation talking about what you're doing about it, because our listeners have a pretty good idea on our foundation and the education that we
Yeah.
do and how we try to combat this. But I want to learn, just because I'm also curious, how you're combating a lot of this stuff. So let's start with some of the programs that I saw on your website that I want to learn more about, because it looks like you've
Hmm.
developed several different clean programs. And let's just take it just to the ones that you do with the fitness
Yeah.
centers across the country. So a couple that I saw that intrigued me, clean clubs and clean athlete. I've kind of touched on that a little bit before, but tell us a little bit more about what those programs are. What's the goal? How do they fulfill those requirements? And what does it really mean when you sign up for one of those programs?
Sure. So the clean clubs, and well, we have like clean sports clubs, and we have clean federations, and I think that the whole sort of thought behind it is that if you want to do effective preventive work, you need to be several places at once with the same message. So the thing is that we try to start early. We try to get into schools early, and then we try to get into the sports clubs, and then we try to influence the sports federations or the national federations, so that the people, once they grow up and get into sports, they get the same message from their coaches and from their teachers, and in order to do that, so it's not just being there once telling them that doping is bad and dangerous, and then going out and they don't hear that same message for a lot of the time. So what we've done then is develop these different programs that you're referring to. So the clean clubs is for the sports clubs, and they can enter into the program. It's free for them, or because it's funded by the Ministry of Culture. So they get in and they get a set of requirements. So pretty much all of our programs are, they enter into it with an agreement with us, and they sort of make a pledge or a stand, and then they have to fulfill different requirements in order to be certified. And then they have to be recertified, and they have to develop a plan of action. So they put down in sort of in collaboration with us, they put down different things that they can do within their club to meet the requirements. So they might differ from club to club or federation to federation, depending on what the risks are. So that's within the sport part of it. And then we do the same for schools, and we do the same for municipalities, and we do the same for counties even. So they sort of do a risk assessment of their own county or municipality or school, and then they put in a plan of action, and then they have to meet the requirements, and we come and sort of revise and check the requirements, and on a sort of a yearly basis or whatever time interval we agree to. And in order to be able to promote themselves as a clean club or a clean center, and then they have to meet these requirements all of the time. So in order not to have their certification pulled or revoked. So that's pretty much the same for the fitness center industry as well. Even though the fitness industry, they have they're not funded by the government sort of bodies, so they have to finance it themselves. So they have to pay a fee as well. And then we come and do the certification program, and they get the sort of the signs on the door, and they get announced on our website, and then they can show off that they're the clean fitness center and they've met the requirements. So it's a stamp of approval, sort of, or a quality stamp that they can use in their own marketing as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's a pretty big part of it for the fitness industry as well. They want to come across as professional, and because not all fitness centers run especially professional. A fitness center is not a fitness center. They're sort of not they're quite a different sort of there are quite a lot of different centers and how on a professional scale they sort of do. So some of them are quite interested in being viewed as professional and then separated from the others that they find not as professional, in order to attract athletes and attract youth and parents, to promote a safe and healthy training environment. So I think that's a big part of the professionalization of the fitness industry as well.
That makes sense. I mean, the word that you said that sticks with me is it just kind of shows people that it's a safe space, right? That they're doing what they can. They're taking it seriously. They're professional when it comes to this. And what I love about it is it provides ongoing education, right? So there's people in there that can talk about this because they've gone through the program and they have to go through it on a regular basis, and creates it just a perpetual message that's important for people to hear that would come in there. And I love that. And I feel like it ties in really closely to another program I saw, and perhaps they go hand in hand. They might be part of the same thing, but I saw another thing on your website called local mobilization, which almost looks like you use local personnel to kind of help share the message. It's almost like, I'm going to train the trainer, or I'm going to train other people to be able to talk about this. Is that what that is? Because if so, that's really powerful, because you can only be in so many places at one time. But if you can train other people to talk about this, then obviously it can spread at a faster rate. I assume that that's what that is. Tell me if I'm wrong, though.
No, you're exactly right. And so the whole thing about it is that we train people to sort of be ambassadors and to mobilize. That's hence the term local mobilization, to mobilize in their local community and be and that's the same thing we do in fitness centers. Like they have to appoint one anti-doping responsible person at the fitness centers, and in the local mobilization program, we have contact persons around the communities that report back to us, and that are sort of the key person in that local community, and they arrange events and they teach other people around there. So because we're based in Oslo and we're not that big of an organization, and as you saw on the map, Norway is a pretty it's a long country. So doing effective preventive work just from Oslo is quite a challenge. And you probably have the same issues over in the US as well, right? So the internet and the digital has opened this up quite a bit as well. But we find that using people in the local community and making them ambassadors, and them being able to provide competence and education to other people around the community is a really powerful tool when we're not able to be there ourselves.
Really powerful. I mean, basically what you're doing is you're creating a team that's bigger than even outside of just Anti-Doping Norway, right? I mean, I think that's really crucial. I mean, we don't have as official of programs maybe to do that as kind of what you've put together, but we try to do that because our foundation, again, we're even smaller than you all are. We're 4 people deep. I mean, we're small, right? Sure. So what we try to do is, let's say we go to a school and we spend some time talking with the students there and giving them the information. We also try to set up time to talk with adult influencers and be in the room with athletic trainers, with coaches, with administration, with parents as much as possible, because they are really the front line. They deal with people and students on a daily basis. So getting them up to speed on a lot of this stuff and getting them comfortable to have those conversations is so crucial, right? Because people just need resources. They need help. They need people to go to. And that's what you're doing through those programs, which I think is incredibly important. So you can make an impact even beyond, just your team directly. It spreads it out, which is really great. And the other thing I saw in the last program I want to ask you about that looks like another way to kind of spread this out, and I'm not sure if this is a requirement or not, but it looked like you also have this thing where you can go through your organization and take qualifying programs to become various different professions, whether it be professional sports medical doctors, physiotherapists, sports medical personnel. It looks like they can go through you to get a lot of this training as well. Is that a national requirement, or is that just another program you offer for anybody that wants to come to you for that?
I think that's the program is included in quite a bit of the mandatory education. If you wanna, I think it even has credits within a lot of the education where you want to specialize in becoming a sports doctor or a sports physiotherapist or working with national teams. So, and a lot of the federations around the country have put that as a requirement for their personnel to complete that course in order to be able to work within the federation or work with sort of national level athletes. So yeah, it's been pretty well implemented throughout at least the top level athletes as part of prevention. Like the supporting personnel around the athlete has to be as conscious as the athlete themselves in order to make good choices and reduce risks, I guess. So yeah, you're right. They're pretty much a requirement in order to be able to work as a sports or supporting personnel.
Yeah, prevention is more powerful when you can have it coming from all different angles, right? When you can have it being discussed from your team doctor to your athletic trainer, from your coach, from people at the fitness center. When it's the more angles, the better it is, right? Like that's what I always say when I go to schools that are even already talking this in their health class. It's like, that's great. Let me also talk about it as well, because just everything is heard in different ways, and the more resources and people that you can turn to just creates a more powerful team, so to speak. So I think it's really awesome to see all the programs you have in place to get that prevention in as many different hands as possible. I think it's a really important thing and a powerful thing. And
I think sports have become so professionalized, right? So the athletes are sort of they have so many people around them now giving them different advice, and that sort of increases the risks, and we can see that it takes away some of the responsibility of the athlete, even though the athlete is really the person that gets hurt if something happens. So I think it's important to now that there are so many involved parties around the athletes, it's really I think it's important.
It's not all on them to
sure.
figure it all out, right? They've got people to help them figure it out and help them guide through there and make the right choices and achieve their goals the right way, which is the end goal of all of this. And I think that's all just part of the puzzle, and it's really powerful, and I applaud you for what you're doing. And I'm curious to kind of wrap all these programs up that you have in place and what you do on a daily basis. And this isn't any kind of scientific question. I'm just curious on the feedback that you've gotten over the years doing this. But what feedback are you receiving after you deliver your education programs, after people go through these programs? Are you seeing opinions and behaviors changing? Like, what are you hearing? What impact are you seeing firsthand just from the job that you're doing every single day?
Yeah, it's an important and difficult question to answer, I think, because like in the ideal world, we would see that our work leads to zero doping within the society and within sports. But it's so if it's behavioral changing, we'd like to think so, I think, but it's difficult to research and actually get sort of good answers to that. But our feedback is what we're getting is really good, and we've tried to develop programs that are easily accessible to people, so that so sort of all athletes in Norway pretty much have to take like a clean athlete e-learning program, and we put that in so it should be so it's easily accessible for all the athletes, and the response for that, we launched the new version last year, and the response has been really good. So I think it's important for us to update our information and update our systems, and so to make it fresh in order for people to, because they know it's important, but they tend to sort of just go through it on, especially if you're a top level athlete, you have to do this every year. And if it's the same information over and over again, you tend to just get routine and you just flick through it. And but we strive to update ourselves so it keeps it fresh and interesting, and we develop new cases for the athletes to ponder about. So they and the response is good, and the feedback is really good, and doing it that way. Whether or not it leads to behavioral change, we hope so, but I think it's hard to tell. We're lucky to not have tremendous doping numbers in Norway within the sports, but it's whether or not that comes down to the prevention. We hope so. And yeah, so it's,
Oh, I'm
but
sure.
it's
I'm sure it plays a role, right? Like the lower numbers, it's going to reflect some of the programs that you have in place. And I know that wasn't really a fair question because you're not going to get feedback from every person that you interact with. You're not going to get feedback from every person that goes through these programs, and so it's there's no way to know exactly the exact level of impact that you're making because I get the same questions like, well, what are you seeing? Are
sure.
people stopping as a result? And I say I don't know. I do think some are. And that's really what you got to live in that mindset, right? Like, look, if this changed a few lives, if this stopped one person here or there, that's what we're here for, right? And all it takes
Yeah,
on my end is someone to come up to me after we're done and say thank you. I didn't know a
yeah.
lot of this, and that's the feedback that I need, and I'm sure you're getting some of that. It can be reflected in a lot of different ways. You'll never know full usage, and we'll never get rid of it altogether. That's not a realistic goal either. But I know we're making an impact. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we run one of the where I know we get feedback of the type that you're mentioning is that we run an anonymous contact sort of chat function where it's called the doping contact, where you can ask questions about doping and about use, and and we have an operator that talks to people and try to prevent doping use and give advice around this and the health consequences and the side effects, and there we very often get the feedback that thank you so much for this information.
Yeah.
This has made me rethink my initial thoughts about using, and so I guess that's the most personal feedback we get, even though it's anonymous. So and it doesn't go into sort of statistics in the same way, but we get a lot of those stories where we help people sort of reconsider their choices, I guess.
Yeah, we have the same thing set up. Every presentation that we do, we have an anonymous phone number and people can text in their questions and they don't have to tell us who they are and they can provide feedback. There really is a crazy amount of similarities between the work we do, the issues you see
Yeah.
there. I mean, look, if you ever move to the US and you need a job, I think we could find a spot for you. I'm not trying to steal you away from Anti-Doping Norway, but there's a lot of similarities in the work that we're doing, the reasons why we're
Yeah.
doing it, and the issues that we're facing. I think that's why it's a powerful conversation to have, just to show how global this is. And that'll all lead us to really one of my last questions. I'll give you a chance to kind of provide advice because I know this is what you do on a daily basis. But
Yeah.
for anyone out there listening that is considering PED use, let's just say anabolic steroids, because we've been living in that world a lot, whether it's for
Yeah.
competition or appearance reasons or fit, whatever the reason is, what's one thing that you want to leave them with? What's a piece of advice coming from you?
I think my best piece of advice is that, well, I guess most of the goal is sort of altering either the way you look or the way you perform. And well, my experience is that it's the effects are very sort of short term, and I think that especially when I did some of the clinical work, and I think that is sort of maybe under communicated as the effects on the musculoskeletal system, where you tend to get some injuries and the as well as the psychological sort of state of mind that it puts you into, where your focus gets a bit skewed, and I think it takes away some of the focus on that your performances are your own. So you attribute too much to sort of an outside component, and I think what's probably is my advice is that to sort of focus on how you can perform by doing something that you can own yourself completely, and not attributed to external factors. I think you'll be more happy with the results that you've achieved on your own, and you can rest assured that you won't have any of the health consequences, even though it differs from other people. You don't have to worry about them, so it puts you in a more sort of safe state of mind psychologically as well. So in order to sort of avoid all the bad thoughts and all the musculoskeletal injuries, and as well, I'd probably just say that focus on the training part, focus on the diet part, focus on the sleep and the restitution and your social life and all the things that these people do very well, but they put in the external component and they attribute too much into it. So focus on the things that you're already doing good and just eliminate one thing, and I think you'll probably find that in the long term, that's going to be a good choice, I think.
Yeah, well, what I pull out of that is what you're saying is, it's going to be so much more rewarding when you do it yourself, right? Like it's harder, you put in the hard work, but at the end of the day, if you've done it without the help of something external like that, that's going to be a way better feeling than if you get to that point, but in the back of your mind, you know that you didn't get to that point the right way. I mean, it's a powerful message because, there's always shortcuts out there, but they're not going to pay off in the long run.
And you won't have to sort of look over your shoulder, so to speak, for the side effects that may or may not come and be there in the long term. So sure. I think it's you'll sleep better at night, I think.
Yeah, it's an important message, and what you're doing is really important work. And I'm going to put your website, Anti-Doping Norway's information in the show notes and all your social media handles, because, we've talked for a while now. We could keep going, but I'm going to encourage everybody to go check out everything that you do, because honestly, we didn't even touch on so much more work that you're doing. It's all really important. So I want people to go check that out. And I really only got time for one more question. It's not what I sent you. I'm going to be completely selfish here and ask you a completely random question out of the blue, because I was not lying when I told you before that Norway is on my short list of countries that I've got to visit sometime soon. So just so I can vicariously live through you for the rest of the day, let's do this. If I said that I was getting on a plane tomorrow to come visit you and I got 24, maybe 48 hours in Norway, can you tell me what we would be doing? What am I eating? Where am I going? What's something cool that I get to see? Give me a couple of things that I can kind of go to sleep tonight thinking about.
Sure. So my two favorite cities are, of course, Mandal, where I'm raised and where I'm at the moment, and then it's Oslo. So I guess if you're coming here, it's on the coastline. So you probably there's a lot of coastline in Norway, which means there are a lot of amazing seafood. So I guess if you're into that, then that's really what I would recommend. And Oslo is sort of a cultural capital in Norway as well as the capital. So there's quite a lot of concerts and shows, and you can go to just sightseeing in the city center is probably what you'll be able to do within 24 to 48 hours. And you can just take public transportation for 10 minutes up into the hills over Oslo, and you can do a bit of skiing there as well, since it's the winter time now. So you just have to get on the tram and have your skis along with you, and you can ski in the capital of Norway. So you'll be able to do that within the time span of where you're here. So you get seafood, coastline, and skiing over the city of Oslo.
I'm in. I've, ever since you told me where you're from, I'm not going to lie, I've been sitting here. Not that I haven't been listening to you, I have, but I've been sitting here looking at pictures and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm daydreaming about going to this place. So one day it's going to happen, and I'm going to give you a call and you're going to show me around, and we're going to make that happen. But for now, thank you for calling in from Norway and giving us your time. But more importantly, just thank you for the work you're doing. I think it's incredibly important. It's fascinating for me to learn that this work's going on in other countries. I value what you're doing. I know it's making an impact, and thank you for the work, and thank you for the time as well. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Brian. Thank you for having me, and the same to you. Keep up your good work over on your part of the world as well.
Well, that's it for today's show. Thanks for listening to the All Me podcast from the Taylor Hooton Foundation, a nonprofit organization leading a national campaign to enlighten people to the truths about appearance and performance-enhancing substances and inspiring people to live and compete without the use of these substances. Please be sure to subscribe to our podcast and tune in to our next episode.